everyone, welcome to Youth Dialogue, which is a one of a kind podcast series which features experts and stalwarts from digital health space, especially the ones who have been paving the way for the rest of us in digital health. And I'm Omkar Satya. I'm your host for today. I'm a partner at CPC Analytics, a German-Indian boutique consulting firm. But what brings me here today is that I'm a member of the youth community, which is the youth ownership of digital health. It's a community of young digital health professionals in India. And the idea is that how do we contribute towards the emergence of the next generation of professionals in this particular space. And today's guest is someone who has been a serial entrepreneur, who has co-founded 1MG and HealthKart. I'm talking about Mr. Prashant Tandon, and he has played a big part in revolutionizing the digital health space since 2009 and has built one of India's largest digital healthcare platforms. So, welcome to the show, Prashant, and thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Omkar. Pleasure to be here.
Great. So, hey, we were going through your profile and we saw that you, in fact, after IIT and after your MBA from Stanford, you then had a career in consulting, right, before you moved on to entrepreneurship. So, what is it that prompted this particular move of moving from consulting to entrepreneurship?
So I think a lot of credit has to go to Stanford and the Silicon Valley to get me excited about the idea of entrepreneurship. I think I was there 2005 to 2007 and interacted with so many people in the startup world in the Silicon Valley, and it was such a buzzing ecosystem that I really got excited about the concept of entrepreneurship. And then right after business school, I really did not have a clear idea of if I were to be an entrepreneur, then what would I want, which space, what is the problem I want to solve. And till I could think of a solution, I thought, let me just spend time in the US doing consulting and keep thinking of areas and spaces where I could potentially one day be an entrepreneur. And thanks to my experience at McKinsey, that's where I actually did got exposure to healthcare and started getting interested in different models of healthcare in different parts of the world. Kind of got convinced that, okay, this is the space where there's a meaty opportunity and to do something meaningful. So that's when I decided, okay, 2009, time to jump in.
So, I think a lot of your consulting career was in the US. So, did you also get an opportunity to look at the Indian market as well as the US market?
So US market, yes. I never worked in India during my consulting days, but having grown up in India, lived in India all along, worked here before my MBA as well. So I was very, very familiar of the Indian context. And I think what I saw was that US market, very organized and sophisticated market with every component of healthcare. It's a huge healthcare economy out there. At that time, their healthcare spend was more than India's GDP, and every part of it is hyper fine-tuned and sophisticated with too many intermediaries. Put it together, it still is not an optimum model, but all the individual components are very optimized. And I thought, okay, this is an interesting space to learn compared to the Indian healthcare ecosystem, which still was largely uh, individual driven service offering rather than an organized industry. So I think and I felt the change will happen in India will get more and more digitized and organized in healthcare delivery. It will get standardized, and all of that, those the good parts of the learnings will come while India will create its own unique model of healthcare. I think the learnings were there from both the ecosystem, but the awareness was also there that it is not like directly replicable, but directionally it is going to influence.
So, specifically, what were the gaps in the market that you thought are attractive enough to get into as entrepreneur?
I think the number one gap in the market was that it was a highly fragmented subscale ecosystem, and every experience of healthcare was a individual experience that wasn't driven by a a standardized process. What that does is that some people get great healthcare, a lot of people don't. um, and the costs of healthcare, generally the economies that come with scale and efficiency and organization, those go missing. And I think that was where we felt was the big opportunity. There's the other big opportunity and pain point, which was the Indian consumer historically, who had treated the healthcare professionals as next to God, was seeing a big shift or loss of trust and faith in the system. The consumers had started feeling that the healthcare system is not working for them, but the providers and doctors are working for themselves. And this trust deficit made the consumer go all over internet looking for second guesses and learning more about, is the right thing happening, am I being given the right treatment, right price, right this. So there was a big clear movement towards the consumer wanted to get more involved in their healthcare. So they wanted more information, they wanted more participation in what is going. They didn't want to be a helpless bystander to healthcare, because the blind faith with which they were willing to operate earlier was no longer in place. So what that did was, with the consumer getting more involved in their healthcare, the opportunity and need was to create a consumer centric model of healthcare, a healthcare system that is designed for the consumer. And this is very important. In most countries of the world, even today, and in India also historically, healthcare has always been designed either for the provider or the payer, either the insurance company in the Western world, or the hospitals in most parts of the world, doctors. They decide what is the model of, or the service quality of healthcare, or the experience of healthcare a patient will get. Most other industries, where consumers are involved, they design around the consumer. So they design consumer centric models because the consumer is the decision making. But in healthcare, because of the knowledge or information asymmetry, the consumers were not given a system that was designed for them. Now, could we design a system with the consumer at the center and the rest of the ecosystem coming together to serve this consumer? We always felt conceptually that's the right model. It's just something very fundamental that has not yet been designed. Can we do that in India? That was the thought process with which we came.
That's interesting because in 2009, if I were to look at it, people searching on the internet would be a completely different universe as compared to today. That entire new cohorts of people have come in. So do you
Yeah.
see that the same expectation is there across all of these, that the market is not working? Is that also true for all of the cohorts of and segments that have come online since then?
See, the move towards online had begun, and it is only accelerated. That's the net of it. That the worst feeling any individual has is the feeling of helplessness. That something is going on that I do not have any idea about and any control about, and I don't know if it is working for me. And that is what people were getting, the feeling with respect to healthcare. Now, many of them would go take second opinions, ask friends, family, go to traditional systems, go to many different, try different things just to get that assurance that they are. And then many people would go on the internet to see if there is anything there that can guide them, help them. So that movement had begun. What happened over the last decade or two is that the percentage of people who would pick internet as one of the potential channels exploded. It became to almost everybody today gets some information or the other from the internet. And 2010, 2011, that movement had just begun. But that was even at that time very perceptible that there's clearly a change happening.
So, yeah, tell us more about how did you go about exploiting this gap that you saw? How did you set about the first entrepreneurial venture?
So actually, when I we came back from the US, the first venture we created was we actually came with a practice management software for doctors to do e-prescription and EMR, EHR, all that stuff. And it was a model that came with the initial thought process was that first we have to digitize the doctor's clinic, and then through that everything else will get digitized, and then comes the next part, which is the benefit to the patient, etc., etc. But very quickly we realized that the practice management software model was not going to scale anytime soon for multiple reasons. And we decided to go direct to the consumer, because at the end of the day, if you want to serve the consumer, we realized it's uh, most efficient to just go directly to the consumer and start serving the consumer. So we first problem we were trying to solve was with HealthKart, which was around authenticity and access. Now, a lot of healthcare products, while working with the doctors, we realized that they go through a very complex supply chain, and there are a lot of quality issues across that supply chain. There would be bunch of products that are imported, then there's an importer, then a master distributor, sub distributors, dealers, retailers, many points in that supply chain. There are products that are made here, but then you have no idea about around authenticity of some of those. And that's what we started with HealthKart. And over a period of time, HealthKart became focused on the main category there was nutrition, because nutrition had a big issue around authenticity. Nutrition supplements, the fear of fake, counterfeit, low quality, substandard product was very very high, because the prevalence was very very high. So we thought we'll create an efficient supply model using e-commerce, where we tie up directly with the brands. We make sure 100% whatever you get will be genuine, and we make it available wherever you are in the country. Very simple. But that simple thing held a lot of promise, because the consumer is of nutrition supplements, the bodybuilders, athletes, they are very conscious about what they put in their body, and they are very very paranoid about quality. So once they got the assurance that yes, you can trust the quality on HealthKart, they started buying, and it became one of the largest categories out there. And then we started learning more and more about consumers, launched our own brands there, etc., etc. Now, another thing we did was, while working with the doctors to help them do e-prescription better, we had created the database of all the medicines with their side effects, interactions, how to use, how not to use. The idea was, when the doctor is doing e-prescription, they'll get all these alerts and all these options, etc., etc., and can do it faster. The doctors never used it, but in 2012 we put it out in the consumer domain, that okay, maybe consumers are reading all over about internet around all medicines and things like that, and there's no trusted source. They're going to all kinds of platforms, getting more scared than educated. Can we just, we've already made a bunch of this information, we've digitized it, should we just put it out there for the consumers to benefit from? And while doing that, we also came across a pretty interesting um, uh, understanding at that point, which was that in India, for the same generic salt, you typically have 100, sometimes 200 different brands trying to sell the same salt in their packaging. Um, and to us, it was very interesting that uh, the price variation could be as high as 80 to 90%. And many times you could actually get a well established global brand at a much cheaper price than what the doctor may have written for you. And this price variation was something that we thought, okay, let's make the consumer fully aware about what is going on. They can have a discussion with their doctors as to brand A versus brand B. If I save 40-50%, is it okay, is it not okay? Let's put the information out there. What happened next was pretty phenomenal, because the consumers received it in a very positive way. And before we knew, just a couple of months of launch, um, this app, HealthKart Plus, it was called at that time, became India's largest health app and the Wikipedia for medicine information in the country. Um, and it grew with zero marketing spend, purely by word of mouth. People started sharing with each other that this is a great service. whenever you buy a medicine, you must know about it. You must talk to your doctor about the different brands, options, choices, etc., etc. And it just virality drove it to number one position in the market, and then it became so interesting and so big by itself, with a little support from us, that in 2015, we are just looking, and it was a fast growing, large scale healthcare information platform. We thought this deserves a full effort behind it. It could be the health app for the country. The entire healthcare ecosystem that we thought would be built with the doctor initially at the center could actually and should actually be with the patient at the center. And maybe this is the platform. So we spun it out of HealthKart, rebranded it into 1MG in 2015, and that's how the journey of 1MG began. And along with that came that, okay, through this platform today we are solving the problem of information and content around healthcare. What else can we expand this to? And the natural next steps was around access and uh, quality and accessibility of healthcare. So on that platform, built a e-pharmacy, e-diagnostics, e-consultation, as services for the consumer, to make sure that it's an integrated offering for the healthcare consumer of India.
That's pretty interesting. How do you see the next few years evolving in this particular sector? Any big trends that you see clearly playing out?
I think last 8 years, 9 years, what we have done is essentially laid the plumbing. The building blocks have come in place. Now information is being delivered, medicines are being delivered, lab tests are being delivered, consultations have been. Similarly, other players have been working, whether it's in the surgery space or insurance space or other thing. But these are individual offerings that have been made available so far to the consumer, and it is kind of provided a more efficient channel to the consumer to access the services they were anyway accessing otherwise also. Now the next phase is when it gets more interesting, where you put these together to create integrated offerings of healthcare and long-term healthcare models, because all of this happening together also generates a lot of data and context of the user. Data science, AI technologies have really matured in the world now. So the next phase of healthcare is much more going towards personalized healthcare, integrated healthcare, life cycle healthcare, predictive, preventative healthcare. And how is all of that going to happen? All the services that the patient need. See, the transition that the ecosystem will see is to moving from a commerce platform to a healthcare platform. And what does that transition mean? Commerce is when the consumer knows what they need and you are providing it in a convenient manner. Healthcare is when you understand what the consumer needs to get better context of health. You are able to engage with that consumer around making the long-term health better, because you have the power of knowledge and data, and you use that to create value-added offerings for the consumer. That you want to manage diabetes, it requires diet, it requires nutrition, it requires mental well-being, it requires frequent lab tests, it requires a bunch of things. Can we make the right workable program for you, rather than you come and say, okay, I want insulin, and you are providing insulin, which is what the first phase has done, that at least it can be provided. Next phase is actually move from commerce to care.
So, does it also mean moving from a transaction-oriented engagement with the consumer to a more continuous one? Is that how you see it happening?
I think the industry will evolve, and healthcare in general, not only in India but around the world, wants to move to more and more value-based healthcare. And it's a beautiful model. If we make you live better, if we make you live longer, you are happier, the business is good, and that's beautifully aligned interest. So the people are paying for things that are working for them. So that's how it should be. That's why I feel the next phase of healthcare, the coming decade, will have a lot of these models come up.
One of the interesting thing that developments that happened during COVID was also this whole teleconsultation, right? That telemedicine has suddenly came into the limelight. Uh, do you see that now dying down now that the pandemic is behind us? Do you see that dying down, or do you see still there's space for that particular thing? I also ask because very commonly in India, one of the arguments that people make is that the personal touch is something that is extremely important. And not just in healthcare, I think they make this across multiple domains. Right? So, do you see
See,
telemedicine? Yeah.
uh, I think most new technologies go through. I'm forgetting the name of the curve, but there's a very specific curve for that. Initially, there is tremendous hype and tremendous
Gartner
expectation,
hype
and
cycle.
probably Gartner hype. Yes, we have been through that first phase where the expectation was that it will solve everything in healthcare. That if you can just get a doctor online, then now we have reached a phase. What COVID did actually was made a fundamental difference to this curve. What it did was, in the initial phase, while most of the investors and observers and everyone were convinced, the people who matter, the patient and the doctor, were not convinced that this is the optimum solution for them. But COVID made them, both forced both entities to engage in that, and what they realized was that it's working well for both of them. And so what has happened is, now most doctors have moved into an omni-channel world. While they would want to see patients physically on a periodic basis, they are very happy to have interim calls digitally. So, and my dad's endocrinologist, cardiologist, they call for a regular meet once in 6 months or so, but in between, one or two calls happen online, and online just keeps sending data, keeps sending stuff, and that evolution has happened. So the doctors realize that it is, um, adherence is much better. If they call patients to come every 3 months, patients just give up, they just don't come. If they say that, okay, you'll come only twice a year and rest of the time we can just have a call, it's a model that works. So that is happening, and it is happening in a stable, steady state right now. And I think, with the this UHI program of the government coming in, where it will also at some point probably get insurance paid, then those things will actually take off in a more meaningful way, like they did in China. Having said that, where is it? It is not at the very high level of COVID, where it replaced all the physical ones. Now it is, there is physical, of course, that's the big part, and an overlay of telemedicine on top of that is happening. So it's a steady growth, steady sized market right now. I am not a pessimist at all that it is something that stopped making sense after COVID, but in fact, on the contrary, now insurance companies are launching outpatient insurance programs based on telemedicine, and corporates are tying up with telemedicine companies for corporate health and wellness to make sure their employees have a doctor on call anytime, anywhere. I think it's becoming continuously more and more mainstream. COVID hastened that process. One thing I've seen in healthcare is, um, every change takes decades. What a COVID kind of thing can do is shorten it maybe 60-70%, but still it takes time. It will take its time, but it's a growth industry. It's not a industry that has in anywhere lost its relevance.
So, in fact, a few members of the community were quite interested in telemedicine as an entrepreneurial opportunity. Do you still feel that there's space to start new ventures in that particular thing?
See, whether the business makes sense depends on a lot of things, and also I think how telemedicine gets delivered and what problem it solves is for whom is very, very important to understand. Now, for the most part, the problem with telemedicine has been that it has been a glorified Zoom call or a WhatsApp. It's between a doctor and a patient, and uh, it doesn't really have the depth of feature set to make it a comprehensive enough examination. Now, how does it make that transition? I think it's up to all of us practitioners to think deeply that what would it take for the doctor to feel that this really solves their problem, and also for the patient to get the comfort that they are getting the service that because I think the other thing is people have kind of internally ex- they've started to expect that an online consultation should not cost more than 150 200 rupees, and if we do not go into quality as the benchmark or the starting parameter, and it is indexed only around what is the cheapest, I think healthcare doesn't work that way. It works on value. People don't want to overpay, but they do need the best care that they get, and they pay the right amount for that. So telemedicine companies also need to get into the right zone and right frame of mind for that. And then, because see, the thing is, if you are charging 100 rupees for a consultation, your ability to get quality doctors to engage goes down, the quality of results goes down, and your business model doesn't make sense. That's because the rest of it will cost what it will cost. So you, as an entrepreneur, you need to be very wary and thoughtful of, do you have a business model with telemedicine that makes sense? I think more and more life cycle care, disease management models with integrated telemedicine and a bunch of other services are seemingly what seems to be working right now.
That's interesting because for telemedicine, one of the often quoted expectations is that it will deliver better healthcare equity. And what you're saying is essentially at the bottom of the market, then the opportunity for creating enterprises is minimal, or in fact maybe non-existent because of these economic pressures. Right?
I'll rephrase it actually, because what I think, creating a business model at this stage will require paying customers for the service that they are getting. And because right now the service is pretty much, again, replacing the physical interaction with a digital interaction. So that it is still a lot of money is saved for even right now. Actually, the one thing about healthcare equity point is that the consumer in the tier 2 3 4 villages actually end up paying a lot more for healthcare when they get it, if they get it. Mostly they just don't get it. So they are in that village suffering from whatever condition they are. If they choose to get a high quality medical opinion, they actually have to travel to the city, bear the cost of logistics, staying, this, that, try and pay then they pay the same as the city person, then they pay the extra cost of accessing everything they need to, and all of that. And many times there are these intermediaries and brokers and facilitators and touts who uh, further kind of create a mess in that process. So the this equity problem is a very significant one, but the result is that that person is not getting healthcare, or not getting it as the same price as their city counterparts, but actually paying more. So now for the same person, can they now, sitting in the village that they are, consult at Apollo, Medanta, Fortis, Max, whoever, some of the top doctors of they can, it is possible, but they still have to pay the fees that needs to get paid. I think that's number one. The other is, when will the cost genuinely come down for those consultations? What is the model for that? I think that will come, and telemedicine does bring that promise. Why does it bring that promise? Is that, see, the cost will come down with the same quality of doctor only if the productivity of that doctor is enhanced manifold. And no industry has grown materially without productivity enhancement. Now how does the productivity of this doctor goes up? How can he see 10x the patients with the same quality in the same amount of time? It is by a part of the job being taken over by technology, and that has started happening, where the first set of triaging, asking questions, preparing the context, just a bot can work. And whether it's companies in China, UK, US, and we are also doing work on it in India. In 5 to 7 questions, a bot can prepare a fairly decent case. Data input, data processing also can be taken over by technology pretty well, which leaves the doctor to do the very important work of data validation and then counseling and guiding the patient. But more than half of the time, or even 70-80% of the time, can get freed, which otherwise the doctor has to spend just asking a bunch of um, rather repeatable questions, very standard questions that the doctors ask, um, processing those answers, then writing what the prescription should be. All of that can be done by technology. The technology can prepare all of that. The doctor can just make the two, three, four edits that need to be. But to get to that world, we need um, a certain amount of scale and certain sophistication of technology, which I feel is coming in a few years. So, in a few years from now, we will be able to have telemedicine genuinely bring down cost of quality consultations. So that will happen. So long term equity, as I said, you have to look at it from both the lenses. One is providing that healthcare at a cheaper cost than what a user today gets, already is doable. Genuinely bringing it down so that more and more people can actually afford that, afford health care of that is not just charity. um, that that will require technology and scale to happen. That's the game to play, honestly. That's where the fun is. So but to get there, should an entrepreneur jump into that? I think it's about phasing it right. An entrepreneur always has to make sure that you have something to stand on, and then you build for the next battle.
Right, of course. Uh, so now from the governmental perspective, right? What role do you see the government playing in this entire transition? Because of course, from a public policy lens, they would be aligned to the vision that you spoke about, right? Of course, that they would also want better quality of healthcare across state of society. What role do you see for them?
A huge role. I think government is a big stakeholder in healthcare, and the government has to um, the see on for entrepreneurship to flourish, um, and to flourish in a regulated ecosystem. You need the government to take um, to give enabling or supportive policy changes, because see, the a lot of the work that technology can do in healthcare, and the kind of technology and the pace at which it is coming, um, is not envisaged by the regulatory ecosystem as of today. And till the ecosystem, an entrepreneur and the people who need to then invest in it, investors, they get comfort and confidence that the government is going to take a positive stance towards regulatory clarity for the various parts of the digital health ecosystem, they would keep being a little shy of um, investing in really breakthrough work, which could be very, very disruptive. So, whether it is creating an AI based uh, digital doctor assistant, or AI, or IoT, and uh, the new gen age of medical devices, or self dispensation units without pharmacists, there's that, point of care diagnostics, um, with remote radiologist or remote pathologist looking at it. All of these are very real things that are happening in many parts of the world. But in India, if they were to happen, investors and entrepreneurs need to know that there is support for that. So, what the government needs is a fast system of giving quick clarity whether things are okay or not. Clarity is most important. This way or that is okay. So I think that part is very important. And if they can take a progressive stance that yes, as a country, we want to make sure we dominate AI in healthcare, we create data models that will be for the entire global south, the models of healthcare. those statements of intent are very important. So the government has to see, the government already has made a huge shift from being a provider of healthcare, which it historically had been, to being now a enabler and payer of healthcare, which it is through NHA and through um, Ayushman Bharat, National Digital Health Mission, etc., etc. Next phase is they need to actually get into enabling the next generation of healthcare. And I think I really hope that the government will make a statement of intent in that direction.
So to be specific, could you maybe outline the top five areas where you think regulatory uncertainty needs to be removed?
I think across the board it is, whether it is, we still have a bunch of issues around e-pharmacy, a bunch of issues around telemedicine, of what is doable, what is not doable, role of AI, where is it applicable, where is it is not allowed, remote pathology, remote radiology, teleradiology, all of those need sharper work. Medical devices, uh, getting into approvals for new age medical devices that are coming up, which are a combination of um, computers, IoT, software, hardware, and healthcare. So all of these things, because there are no pathways, there are no current. These are things that are coming, but and typically the regulator, it's not a new thing that the innovation comes and then the regulators follow that. And I think fundamentally that is the way it has been. But to move at the pace the country needs to and can move, that pace has to be much faster. Just make that gap shorter. That so that entrepreneurs can engage real time. That okay, I'm building this. Go ahead, or red flags, or what is the box that I can play in. And work is being done on that. So it's not that these things are not moving on that. So whether sandboxes with the NHA and a few other areas, but I think the more we are clear as a country that we are here to create these new models and technology will play a role, because otherwise healthcare access will always be a big question of how do we make that happen without the fundamental improvement in technology and productivity, because there are only two levers that otherwise either the cost will really really go up or quality will really really go down if we don't have productivity and technology come in.
So now, if I were to just compare, let's say, places like Europe, which have quite strict regulations on the application of these tech, right? Especially in healthcare as well. And now we see that effect that some of the latest tech is actually not deployed in some of these Western or European markets earlier. They take some time to adjust to the regulations and deploy it. This regulatory uncertainty, if you were to remove it, do you also see a space for Indian enterprises to take the lead over Western counterparts and perhaps become the cutting edge of tech and healthcare?
The opportunity, as I said, is immense out there, and the way I'm seeing it is that the first opportunity is to create models for the entire global south. That is where the one big opportunity. In the western developed markets, the problems they are solving are very different than the problems we need to be solving. The problem we need to be solving is that a lot of our population is not getting access to quality healthcare at the time that they need it, at the price that they can afford. And to solve the problem that we need to be solving, we need to move into adoption of technology at a very rapid pace, and we need to make sure that we are moving in with a very determined idea that for example 2012 China had this view that they wanted to reduce the footfalls in government hospitals, so they created an internet hospital as a concept, so that people who don't really need to, are not dealing with something that requires a physical visit, should just get it digitally. Now it is a very clear statement of intent that okay, we do not want to clog our physical hospital ecosystem, and a part of that we want to serve through a digital ecosystem. And that over the last decade or so and during COVID and all helped them manage decently. In our case, it was private enterprise that set up a bunch of the models, and uh, thankfully we were ready when it was required. Um, so models will are going to get created, but the opportunity to really the game with AI and data sciences is that speed does and scale of data um, does define the quality of your product. And I think the faster we move, the better we will be positioned to capture it everywhere. And the West will follow these models a lot slower, because productivity is not the number one challenge that they are caring about at this point. They're For them, the much bigger concerns, which are actually well addressed uh, in the models we are also around, whether it is around privacy, whether it is around more than anything, it's the fear of unknown. They don't know what could bring, so they don't want to take a chance. We may be in a position where we have to believe that it's going to help, and show them that okay, this worked, and now we have something that may be applicable there also.
That, yeah, that makes sense. One of the other things, since data and the centrality of it is quite crucial in this whole healthcare and tech space, right? Do you see applications of this data to solving other problems in public health, which may not necessarily be entrepreneurial opportunities, but perhaps a collaboration with the government, where you see there are significant opportunities where you are able to add value because of the collection of large amounts of data.
Definitely, I think, and we do try to make sure that we stay in touch with the public health requirements, whether it's NGOs, whether it's the government, and a lot of work that we do and models that we make will be useful to the government. Hopefully, they will be able to use it at the public scale, and vice versa. Government is making very, very important and interesting digital public goods. We would be They would enable our business to move faster, better. So for example, government is trying to do standardization across medicines, lab tests, doctors, hospitals, create some basic foundational repositories which we have been trying for years. So I think all of those come together, protocols, data exchange networks, all that come from the government. Everything we are developing will have public health implications. And as I said, government is also very open now to having the private players um, partner in the delivery part of the process. So it's the government doesn't necessarily want to be the deliverer of healthcare. They want to be the enabler now. So there will be more and more opportunities, I'm sure.
I mean, they did launch their own telemedicine platform for consumers, and then also the B2B telemedicine one, right?
Which is great. I think, there is always the government plays the role of healthcare provision for those who cannot afford get it from the private sector, and that is the role a government has to play. And now what they are doing with Ayushman Bharat is letting those same people actually go to the private sector, and the government just pays for it. So that's a wonderful progressive thought process. I think the counter thought process of them deciding that okay, now let's take over and deliver healthcare ourselves only doesn't seem to be the direction that the country is headed towards. I don't think that is what we would like. Other than that, I think we are in the right direction.
So, looking back now, these 15 years that you've been in India, looking back, this evolution of the Indian market that has happened, and of course, the US would also have evolved in its own way. Right? How do you compare it now, right, between these 15 years? And perhaps there are things that uh, we have done terribly good at, but also maybe absolutely horrible at, right? So, what do you think of this whole 15 years, especially as compared to the US?
No, I think we've moved very, very fast in the last uh, 15 years in the Indian ecosystem, I think the kind of changes we have seen, the kind of and COVID, of course, being a landmark moment in time. So for digital health ecosystem, a lot has happened. It would have taken 25 years to happen. Now it's happened in 15 because of that one big push where the entire ecosystem woke up to the same need almost overnight. So um, I've seen from the even the from when you talk to people in the government, from early stance of anything uh, that you talk about, they say that this is not allowed, and this won't be possible to that. Okay, this makes immense sense. Can we expand it to some of our government programs also? Can we do take it forward in different directions? So the Indian ecosystem has woken up in a very, very interesting way. I think the way our hospitals are today embracing digital health, the way insurance companies are doing that, corporates are doing that. um, for the pre-COVID part of the healthcare evolution, it was just us and the consumers who were engaging with each other on transactions, as I said. The What COVID did, the most material contribution to this industry was that the all other stakeholders also woke up to the uh, value of digital healthcare, whether it's the doctor, whether it's a corporate, insurance company, pharma company, government. Everybody woke up to, okay, this is now um, a key part of the healthcare delivery architecture of the country. So, and the number of players, the amount of investment that has come up into this sector, it had been very slow earlier. It was just a few of us who were trying to make something work. A lot more has happened over the in the COVID and beyond phase for this sector. So I think US is seeing continue in US. There's another actually in US, healthcare is more and more, it is being acknowledged that healthcare is becoming a technology business. And in when I say that, what it means is that today, if you look at all the large healthcare companies, all the large companies of the technology companies, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, and today there was a news about OpenAI also. They're all saying that for them, Amazon, all of them are saying healthcare is the next frontier for them. They are doing research, they are doing work on digital healthcare, solving various different kinds of things. All of them are going aggressively after healthcare as a line of business. And so US is seeing a very different kind of or a different level of interesting work going on there. All the traditional healthcare companies are actively spending in digital as well. Having said that, US continues to be a huge market where small slivers are very large opportunities. So there the innovation is still on the micro optimization of small areas. When you come to India, the innovation is systemic. Because look at Tata 1MG. We provide pretty much everything there is in healthcare, and we optimize it as a whole, because that's kind of how the markets are smaller, and opportunity is everywhere. So that's kind of the difference in the two markets and how they evolve. US is about going deeper, narrower. India, you take it all together and bring the ecosystem together, and everything kind of works together.
Are we on track to repeat any of the mistakes that the US or the Western markets have done?
I hope not. I don't. It doesn't look likely. I think that, see, the biggest problem of the US is the payer, the provider, and the consumer are all aligned differently. So the and optimized for different things. The patient, after they have paid for their insurance, just does not care, however expensive it might be. The payer is very, very focused on uh, how to minimize the insurance outlay. Having said that, and then there are so many intermediaries that are in the middle trying to make um, some business model here and there. India is a much more aligned and easier ecosystem. The For the most part, the payer is the consumer, and then there is the provider, and the payer and provider are engaging with each other to make sure that. And used to be a phase where there was a knowledge asymmetry that was very significant. Now that is getting more and more balanced with context being available to the consumer also. So I think, if anything, I think it's a good opportunity for us to acknowledge the positives that come from the Western models, but make sure that we don't have the fundamental problem of healthcare that the system has to always address is the alignment incentives. That the provider's incentive should not be different from the incentive of the consumer or the incentive of the payer. Right now, the hospital wants to maximize the bill, the insurance wants to minimize the bill, and the patient, depending on whether he's the payer himself or not, is in the bucket where either does not care at all, or can't afford it. It's just out of zone. We need to make sure, if we can just, that's the fundamental difference between the US model and what India seems to be heading to. I firmly believe India is heading towards the right model. And now with for example, Narayana has moved into a end-to-end integrated model with their insurance play. So that's, or whether it is the Kaiser model in the US, those are aligned models where the idea is to maximize the life cycle of the patient and well-being of the patient, and minimize the cost of the management of the patient, and both of them together lead to a healthy business for the company. That's, and or the country in that sense. So that's where I think we have an opportunity, and we are moving there. We are not going in the, we can't afford in anywhere to go towards the US kind of a model. It's just prohibitively expensive.
Cool. So I think in consideration of the time, maybe I'll just ask you the last set of quick fire questions that you can answer. And so what's the one harsh truth of entrepreneurship that you've had to learn?
It's the it's a grind. There is and there are easier ways to make money, but you go through a lot. So the primary driver should not be money. It's a suboptimal choice for that reason. It has to be something more.
And as a CEO, what is the most valuable lesson that you have learned?
It's the most valuable lesson that I have learned. Okay, you have to clear the path for your teams to shine. Your main job is that you don't have to be the doer of every activity of the company, or the decision maker of every activity of the company. You have to get the right people, and then actually give them the space to do what they need to do, including making their own mistakes. So to me, letting go is one of the most important things for a CEO to do, and build a team that and then trust and empower them.
And lastly, which are the few healthcare companies that you look up to?
I think, as I said, I'm a good big fan of the Kaiser model. I think that's some very good work happening there, and I think uh, in that sense, now that Narayana is doing it here, that's also a good play.
If there was one piece of advice that you would want to give out to the young entrepreneurs, apart from the not moving after money piece, what would it be?
Important thing to remember in the journey of entrepreneurship is that as an entrepreneur, you will always have big highs and big lows, and that can lead to a lot of um, stress that is not productive for you as an entrepreneur. So be wary and mindful of that. Over a period of time, an entrepreneur learns to take it in the stride, the highs and the lows. In the early phase, you just go up and go down a lot harder. Just try to balance it out. It's a marathon, so prepare yourself accordingly, because these sudden highs and sudden lows, while that adrenaline does bring a lot of activity over a long period of time, balance is what really takes you there.
What's the one app that you can't function without?
WhatsApp.
And on your day off, who will win, the sports enthusiast in you or the tech geek in you?
I would say the sports enthusiast.
Mm. All right, super. On that note, probably I think it's time for us to end this particular podcast. But thanks a lot, Prashant. This has been really illuminating, and not just for me, I'm sure for all of the people who listen to this podcast.
Uh,
Thanks a lot for sparing your time, and I'm sure that this is just one of the many conversations that we would have.
Thank you, Omkar. I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me here.